Welcome to Sacred Place Live. I'm glad you're able to join me. I'm Matthew, your host. This is the fourth week of Advent, when we look at the story of Mary. I talked about this a little bit on Sunday for those who were able to be with us, but I will pick up with the beginning of the story. The Gospel of Luke introduces the story of Jesus after the writer Luke has researched and studied all of the accounts of Jesus' life. He writes that he is telling this story so that the foundation beneath the belief in this story might be even more firm. It's not to prove these stories, but rather to add color to them, so that they might be understood in a way that brings life. Before today's text, when we get to Mary finding out about her new future, her relative, Elizabeth, who was older and barren, unable to conceive, finds out that she is pregnant with who we would later know to be John the Baptist. That's where we pick up in the story of Mary from the Gospel of Luke. When Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a city in Galilee, to a virgin who was engaged to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David's house. The virgin's name was Mary. When the angel came to her, he said, "Rejoice, favored one, the Lord is with you." She was confused by these words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. The angel said, "Don't be afraid, Mary. God is honoring you. Look, you will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord will give him the throne of David, his father. He will rule over Jacob's house forever, and there will be no end to his kingdom." Then Mary said to the angel, "How will this happen, since I haven't had sexual relations with a man?" The angel replied, "The Holy Spirit will come over you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore the one who is to be born will be holy. He will be called God's Son. Look, even in her old age, your relative Elizabeth has conceived a son. This woman who has labeled unable to conceive is now 6 months pregnant. Nothing is impossible for God." Then Mary said, "I am the Lord's servant. Let it be with me just as you have said." Then the angel left her. Mary got up and hurried into a city in the Judean highlands. She entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth had heard Mary's greeting, the child leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. With a loud voice she blurted out, "God has blessed you above all women, and he has blessed the child you carry. Why do I have this honor, that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as I heard your greeting, the baby in my womb jumped for joy. Happy is she who believed that the Lord would fulfill the promises he made to her." So Mary responds, maybe in the way most of us wouldn't. A young, unmarried woman finds she is pregnant. That's less controversial these days, but we hear in other parts of the story that Joseph had a mind to quietly divorce her so that he might not be shamed by this. That's not what happens, but Mary's situation is somewhat dire. Yet, she says, I am the Lord's servant. Use me. Help me to be the one who you have called me to be. There are lots of things going on in this text. There are two miraculous births, not about the body of these women, one who is too old and unable to conceive, and one who is young and, mathematically speaking, unable to conceive because she has not had that relationship with a man yet. But these births are not about them and their bodies, but more about God's power. Our God who makes the impossible possible. These things which cannot and should not be, just as Mary asks, are. Let's talk a little bit about who Mary is. She is displaced, eventually, as the census comes. She and Joseph have to leave their home and go to be counted. Joseph, who is of David's royal line. She understands, Mary, that the promises of God to establish the throne of David for eternity are being fulfilled through her. Her lowly status as just a single woman of no high standing, no queen, no princess, no royal one. And even in this time, part of an oppressed group. This census is a command from the Roman Empire that just really shows and displays how unimportant Mary was otherwise. And yet her future is about to change in ways that she probably could only imagine. As we wrap up this series a long winter, this Advent during a pandemic, we ourselves, I think, are asking, is anything ever going to really change? There is this glimmer of hope as vaccines become available and have been approved and seem to be effective, but then there is news of variations of the virus that are spreading even faster, though it seems that the vaccine will still work against them. That leaves us with the hope and possibility of how things will change. But sometimes it still feels like nothing's ever going to change. When we look at how divided our country is. Though our leadership may be changing, that division doesn't seem like it's going to get any better. But God works through the unexpected ways that we experience. Mary conceiving a baby is not the way I think people would have expected then for the throne of David to be established forever. The hope, peace, joy, and love of Advent don't come in the ways that are easy or expected. Hope comes through our resilience, our resistance. Peace comes by the healing work of God, not by conquering. Joy comes in the possibility of what that healing looks like, that restoration of what God had planned. And the love comes through our God and through a mother who had every right to say, "No, not me." What sticks out to me most in this story is maybe how the Holy Spirit, who we often reserve for Pentecost, is present in Mary's life. It is the Holy Spirit who visits Mary and causes the child, the Christ child, to be conceived. God's Spirit has been moving and is moving long before we recognize it. It's moving and transforming Mary's life. The Spirit, in her creative ways, brings about the promises of God. During this long winter, which officially just started yesterday, but these long nights will get shorter. The light will grow, and God's love will be known throughout our lives, hopefully spreading quickly to our country and world. If we learn nothing else from this Advent season, it's that hope, peace, joy, and love are worth it. We may have to work for them, but God promises that all of these things will come to pass. So today, we light the candles of hope. Hope found in resisting the ways we are asked to compromise our faith. A peace which only God can bring by healing. Joy for what the kingdom looks like when God restores all that God has promised. And the love of our God, found in unexpected places. God's promises fulfilled in unexpected ways. These 4 ideas have carried us through these 4 weeks as we now are mere days away from Christmas. Mary's song, the Magnificat as we call it, reveals a bit of who she understands God to be. I offer you now this musical version of it, that you might reflect on God's promises.
My soul sings out to the Lord. My heart exclaims the work of God, my deliverer. For God has seen the status of God's lowly servant, and rightly, from this time forward, all the generations will see that I was blessed. For the Great One has done magnificent things through me, and I call upon the mystery of God's name. God's mercy is for those who honor God from generation to generation. God has shown the hand of justice by scattering the proud, humbling their haughty thoughts. God has brought down the powerful from their high places and lifted up all the lowly. God has filled the hungry with God's plenty and sent away the wealthy with empty hands. God has helped God's servant, Israel, to remember God's rich mercy in accordance to the covenant made to our ancestors, to Abraham and to his children forever.
Christmas will be here before we know it. I invite you to join me on Thursday at 5:45 for our Christmas Eve by candlelight. Bring a candle and prepare yourselves to welcome the Christ child through story and song. These ideas of hope, peace, joy, and love, which we have experienced in these weeks leading up to Christmas Eve, will carry us through this story of how God's promises were fulfilled in a little baby, and it would change human trajectory forever. May God be with you until we meet again. This is your sacred place.